Alright, here we go again. So I have preheated the bed, preheated the end, and I've already extruded filament. Now what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to briefly go over leveling the bed. I've already done it off camera just to speed this along a little bit. And I'm going to tell you what I have planned for my first print on this machine. So in the previous video I talked about wanting to align the the Z motor properly so that this rod isn't bent out. And then I found a spacer file to do such a thing. Someone has already modeled it and it's on Thingiverse to download for free and print. So that is what I'm going to be doing, is printing. It's a spacer that spaces it away from this upright here. And then it also has adjustment left and right to align it to be completely parallel with this upright. The next thing I'm going to print, another thing from Thingiverse, is a filament guide that goes around this Z-rod screw and attaches to these two screws. And it essentially just makes sure the filament doesn't touch the Z-rod while it is being fed into the extruder. And then finally, I mentioned in the last video that I don't like this, how high up it is, how much room there is for this thing to get tangled. And again, on Thingiverse, someone has made a adapter that attaches to the T-slot rail and then sets the spool holder off to the side here. And apparently it clears all these wires. I mentioned previously that I was kind of concerned about that, but it's supposed to clear the wires, which would be really super nice if it does. And I've already got them loaded on the memory card. One thing I noticed, and I don't know if anyone else has experienced this or not, my bed is higher around the edges than it is in the center, which I really don't like, and I am not sure how to fix that. I may be able to see. I'm not sure if it's this sheet here, this removable sheet, the magnetic build sheet, or if it's this layer that makes the aluminum heated plate magnetized so that the plate can stick to it, or if it's the aluminum itself. I don't know what is causing that that dip in the center, but I may remove the build plate entirely, take off the magnetic sheet, set a straight edge across here, and sand down the edges, and it's all four sides are higher than the middle, because as of right now you can see on the side here the nozzle drags along the build sheet when it's in its home position and you move the bed forward and back, and that's not necessarily desirable, as A, it scratches the build sheet, which then means that scratch will get transferred to any part that ends up touching this edge, which I don't think anything would ever touch this edge. That's a huge print volume to print all the way out to the edge of the machine. I may not ever get to that point where I'm printing something that large, but it's still not desirable. Now I have just a piece of paper, and essentially what you're supposed to do is, with the machine preheated, you slip this under the edge and the paper should be somewhat stiff to move underneath the nozzle, like this, where you can still go forward and backward, but you'll notice there's a little bit of resistance. So that is what we want. I'm not going to do any more leveling. I noticed a little bit ago, like, this whole thing was out of whack, and you're supposed to do the corner and then the other corner, and you adjust these knobs. You turn them right to lower the bed, you turn them left to raise the bed, and you go corner, corner, and then you go opposite corners, and you just check those a few times. Now when I did this, I came all the way in to directly above the knobs instead of being all the way out on the edges, because I figured this point is closer to being matching the center point than the edge is, obviously. So that's what I did. I went right above the screw knobs on all four corners, oscillated between them, and then went straight to the middle and verified that it's decent distance from the build plate on the mill. Now what that does is, when I print the first layer, the outside edges of the shape are going to be squished more and flatter against the build surface than the middle. The middle is going to be a little bit raised and higher. But after the first layer, that should solve itself because the nozzle is at a set height. So it'll be squished more out here, squished less in here, and then that will cause a more level surface for the next layer to go on top of. So it shouldn't affect anything too much when it comes to print quality. So all 3 files are on this one save file on the memory card. So go ahead and hit that. It'll heat the bed to 60 degrees Celsius. It'll heat the end to 200 degrees Celsius. That's what my slicer settings are set for. And then we'll start seeing this thing turn into a cyborg and start moving on its own, which is fairly exciting. So the bed has just reached its temperature, 61 degrees. It'll cool off a little bit down to 60. But it's supposed to stay as close to 60 as it can. There it goes, back down to 60. And now the extruder is heating back up, or heating up to 200 degrees Celsius, which is the recommended settings in the slicing program Cura, which is what is recommended to be used with this machine. And I'm going to run it and see if the PLA likes it. I might need to raise the temperature or lower the temperature depending on how the print quality is. But we'll go over that once I finish these upgrade parts and get the machine solid to the point that I like it. Okay, done heating. It's homing the machine so it knows its starting point. Now it is purging some material. And there we go. It's starting to print. This is just the, what do they call this? The brim. Shows the outline of the parts. And I believe I have this set up for 3 shells, which would mean 3 outside layers on the part. And then there's different infill settings for each piece. Infill is how much material gets put into the middle of the part. So it should do the first layer for all 3 pieces. And then it will raise up and do the second layer for all 3 pieces and continue that on across until it is finished. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'll come back once all the parts are finished. I'm going to be setting up a GoPro to film prints for the future. I'm not going to film this currently just in case there's any errors or whatever, so I want to be able to stop the machine and show what happened as an error, but not have to sit here and, you know, like babysit the camera or waste a bunch of camera space for just printing time. Well, there was an error. Let's go ahead and stop print, which turns off the steppers, which means I can get this out of the way. So that was a bed level issue. You'll notice that the left hole did not print. Alright, I got the build platform cleaned off. I'm homing the machine again. Once it's homed, I will re-level it again, because something was clearly off there. So definitely not close enough at the back here, so I'm going to raise up the rear knobs. Okay, feels better. A little bit too much on this side. And that's good. So now I'll go ahead and start the print again. Print from card. It'll preheat. It'll start printing again, and hopefully it will print properly and not miss a hole. But I guess we'll see. Okay, preheat's done. It's going to home itself again, and then it'll begin printing. And what do you know, it's already getting tangled. So you might be able to see it's more squished here and thinner around certain areas, which means it's lower at those thin areas and higher at those squished areas. That's a good sign. It's able to print the holes properly. Put a little bit of extra light in here. Alright, and there we have it. 3 finished prints. I'm going to pop them off the build sheet and then we'll install them real quick.